Welcome back to another edition of the Jacob and Jacob podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Hare, and with my co-host, Jacob Roblom. And today, we're joined by a very special guest, Cole Cubelic. Thank you so much for being with us today, Cole.
Hey, man, thanks for having me. Good to be with you guys.
Cole is a former offensive lineman and captain of the Auburn Tigers, and he's now a college football analyst at ESPN. So let's get right into it, Cole. How did you get into broadcasting after your collegiate career at Auburn?
Cool. That's a long answer. It was something that I always wanted to do, and it was something that I did kind of want to make a career out of. But when I finished school, there just weren't a lot of opportunities. There weren't a lot of online publications. Satellite radio hadn't gone deep into sports. Podcasting wasn't even a real thing. So it was difficult to find those opportunities, and the ones that you could find, they weren't really paying you any money, and you needed experience. So I got a job in pharmaceutical sales. I was tired of being broke and just kind of went into that. And my first off season, or the first season after I was done playing, I knew a guy locally in Huntsville, Alabama, through my father that owned a radio station that carried Auburn football. And I just basically pulled into the building one day, asked if he was there. He was. I sat down with him, and I said, my quarterback on the team last year, I played center, lives 20 miles away. I live here. We could do a better pregame show than anybody else because we know that team better than anybody else. We were on it last year. Why don't you give us like a pregame show? And he said, I learned one of my most valuable lessons in sports radio then. He said, if you can sell it, you can have it. And so we went out and sold a couple of advertisers, got them on board, did a 30-minute pregame show. That turned into an hour and then a 2-hour pregame show that we actually did from campus. And that got me an opportunity doing the spring game on CSS, which is the television entity that no longer exists. That rolled into doing Sunbelt games for CSS, which turned into some stuff with the SEC network and then different radio stuff and on and on. That was about a 10-year process that I just described in 3 minutes. So it wasn't one of those things where I decided I wanted to do it and boom, I was there doing it. It took a long time. It took a lot of networking. It took a lot of trial and error. It took a lot of swings and misses, but it was something that after that first show that we recorded on a Wednesday night, I remember driving home to my apartment. I called my mom and I said, that's where I belong. That's what I need to be doing. That's what I want to do. And she said, good. Awesome. I'm glad you figured that out, but whatever you do, don't quit your day job because that's where you get your income. So figure out a way to do it and still be able to pay your bills. And it took a long time, but I think we've kind of figured out how to do that now.
Did you always see yourself covering the SEC because you played in the conference, or was that just something that happened?
I mean, I think that's natural, obviously, because I've never lived outside of the state of Alabama, and I played at Auburn. So, both my parents went to South Carolina. I have a lot of family in Columbia. I've been around it a long time. It's what I know more than anything else. And so, I would love to continue to spread my wings and cover more of college football on an intimate basis. But I think breaking in, starting out, it was pretty good for everybody. The fact that I do local radio in Birmingham, which has an Alabama, Auburn, SEC emphasis. And then obviously my playing experience where I grew up just kind of lends my hand to that as well.
Is there a little rivalry in your house with your parents going to South Carolina and you going to Auburn?
No, not really. I mean, my dad's still a South Carolina fan, but I mean, he's an Auburn fan as well. Both my parents kind of became Auburn fans when I decided to go. So they hate Clemson more than they hate anybody in the SEC.
Well, let's talk about SEC football. Last season, Joe Burrow and the LSU Tigers had an unbelievable season, one of the best ever. Do you think they can repeat that kind of season, or are they going to have a sluggish season without Burrow?
They're not going to repeat it just because you can make a real argument that it is the most impressive season in the history of college football. And I think when you look at their resume, I don't really think it's debatable. If you look at the resume of what they did, who they did it to, and how they did it, I think you sit there and you say, this is the greatest team ever assembled. Now, I think what happens is people lose context on that, and they take a Miami team or a 95 Nebraska team, and they don't look at the opponents, or they only look at guys that were drafted, or they have the ability to already look at what those players have done in the NFL, and I don't think that's the context in which it should be stated. If you're talking greatest college football team,
Mhm.
then you take what they did on the field and who they did it against, and that's how you grade them. You don't grade them by draft picks. You don't grade them by NFL careers or anything like that. And so 95 Nebraska has been the standard for me for a long time. And I think what this LSU team did was more impressive. With what they lost and how impressive they were a year ago, that is not going to be replicated this year. Now, I don't think that means they're going to be a 3 or 4 win football team. I think they can still challenge in the SEC West. I think you're talking about a team that has probably the second best offensive player returning in college football, maybe the best defensive player returning in college football, and Jamar Chase and Derek Stingley. The middle of the defensive line is going to be really good. You got a quarterback that's been there for a while. He's watched things progress. He knows the system. He knows his teammates. And you got a head coach that knows how to get his guys to play for him. So other than welcoming in Bo Pelini, I don't see there being a lot of issues that LSU can't overcome. And I think a lot of other teams in the West have a lot of question marks. We know Arkansas is going to have low expectations.
Yeah.
Mississippi State's putting in a brand new offense with a brand new quarterback that hadn't been on campus. That's going to take some time to get going. Ole Miss is going to have a new system that they're going to try to install. They'll be different. Auburn loses their entire offensive line, loses 2 of the best defensive linemen in the league, loses a lot of their secondary. They're going to be a different team. Alabama has real concerns on defense, in my opinion. And I think Texas A&M is a team that can challenge, but we haven't really seen them take the next step and be great in the league other than the year Manziel won the Heisman. So, they have a lot to overcome. So I think LSU could still be in the mix based on what's coming back and based on the culture that they've already proved that they have. And I think that's one thing that helps them going into this year, especially with this pandemic and guys being away from their facilities. Your culture is going to mean a lot about what you do this year, because that's going to determine who's been working out on their own, who's been watching more film on their own, who's been studying and trying to improve their game on their own. And the guys who have been doing that are the guys that are going to be able to find extra ways to succeed this fall.
Do you think that Burrow had the best season ever for a quarterback, along with LSU's best season ever?
It's a worthy discussion, and I wouldn't be mad if you said yes. I'll still go to Cam Newton and what he did at Auburn in 2010, because there hasn't been another NFL reception or rush attempt on that 2010 offense. Cam Newton's the only one that has them, and obviously the only one that has a pass attempted as well. Only one offensive lineman started a game in the NFL. That was Brandon Mosley for the Giants in a reserve role. So when you look at the lack of talent, and he had good college football players, Emory Blake and Philip Lutzenkirchen. They were good college football players, but Joe Burrow had some potential elite NFL talent on that side of the ball with him. And I think that sort of separates things a little bit. I'll always go to Cam and what he did, because so much more of that team was on his shoulders. But if you said Joe Burrow, I think it's a worthy argument, and I think it's really close to being a coin flip over who had the best college football season in history.
So go ahead, Earl.
Yeah, sticking with quarterback talk, Alabama, Mac Jones looks like he's going to be the starter next season. What do you see for that team this season? Do you think Mac Jones will be successful replacing Tua Tagovailoa?
I think he'll be successful just because of what he has around him, and because it's Alabama and the culture that's been built there. Like I said, I have questions about the defense, but they're going to have the best offensive line returning in college football. I think they're going to have an elite group of receivers still, even though you lose Ruggs and Judy. You got Jalen Waddle, who is one of the most dangerous college football players in the nation when he has the football in his hands. You got Devonta Smith, who is going to be a guy who can help stretch the field, an excellent receiver. You got a stable of running backs that are going to be able to help you turn into more of a ground and pound football team, which will protect your quarterback. So I think that's a big advantage for Alabama also. So there's a lot of things that I look at that team and I see that they're going to be able to be the front runner in the SEC, one of the best teams in college football. And there's a lot of things that will help make life a little bit easier on Mac Jones. If he can adapt to the RPO scheme that Tua was so good at last year, off of the run game that I believe they're going to have, then I think he will have some success. Now, that doesn't mean he's going to put up the same numbers. That doesn't mean he's going to be drafted in the first round. But I think he can be a really good college quarterback. He's coming off back-to-back 300-yard games. So that's 2 more 300-yard games against Power 5 opponents than Jamie Newman has. And everybody's peeing their pants about Jamie Newman. So, I think Mac Jones will have a good year. I think whether or not Alabama wins a national title or gets to the playoff or wins the SEC, that'll be more on the defense than it will be on Mac Jones.
Is Jamie Newman an elite quarterback in the SEC? Do you consider him one of them?
No. He hasn't played an SEC game. How can he be an elite quarterback in the SEC if he hasn't played a game in the SEC? He doesn't have a 300-yard game against a Power 5 opponent. And people can talk about the guys that he had around him, but when you study some of those receivers and backs that he had, they were actually pretty good. And the offensive line protected fairly well for him. When you really study what they did, I think you can also talk about the defenses that he was playing against. And it wasn't very often that he was playing against elite competition on defense. So does he have big-time talent? Yes. He's got good mobility. He's got a big, strong arm. I think he's a lot better when he's throwing to his left than he's throwing to his right. He does some good things over the middle of the field. I think he has good accuracy down the field, but I think consistency is something that he struggles with. We also don't know what the offense is going to look like. I mean, Coach Monken hadn't been in college football in almost a decade, so we don't know what that's going to look like. They hadn't been on campus together. The offensive line's being rebuilt. Sam Pittman's gone. Matt Luke's in. There's just a lot of things that are going to be different about that side of the football for Georgia that I have real question marks about. Jamie Newman's got talent. You cannot doubt that. You cannot deny that. But to tell me that he's an elite SEC quarterback is something he's going to have to prove. I'm not just going to label him that. I'm not just going to give it to him. He's got to come in and earn it.
Yeah.
And what do you make of them bringing in JT Daniels from USC?
I think nowadays in college football, if you can get a big-time talent at that position, bring it in.
Yeah.
You have to, because obviously injuries are going to be a part of what happens. Look at Florida last year. Felipe Franks gets injured, and it's an upgrade with Kyle Trask. So sometimes you just don't know, but you better be in a position for that to potentially happen. And then I think, too, you don't know when guys are going to leave, be it to the NFL. Jake Fromm leaves, and he's a fifth-round draft pick. A lot of people inside that facility probably thought he was coming back.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, you don't know when guys are going to transfer. And that feels like the most popular position for transfers. So you better get more than one talented quarterback on your roster, and you probably better get more than two, because chances are somebody's going to get hurt, somebody's going to leave early, or somebody's going to transfer. And you got to have other guys waiting to be able to take over. I mean, look at the spot that they were in last year. If Jake Fromm would have gone down, they would have been in a lot of trouble if Jake Fromm gets injured last year. So I think Kirby Smart realizes, hey, there's a really talented guy we can get our hands on, get him in, let him compete. We know somebody's probably going to leave. We've already dealt with that when Justin Fields left, when Jacob Eason left. We know what it's like. We can manage it, but we need more talent on the roster for when those guys do leave, that somebody else is going to be able to be here to take some snaps.
What do you make of the Gators quarterback situation that you were talking about earlier?
No, I think they're in a good spot, because I think Kyle Trask is someone that understands how to manage a system. He understands how to execute what his coach gives him. And no one's better than Dan Mullen than taking what you have and putting it to good use. There is no square peg and round hole for Dan Mullen. I mean, he takes exactly what he has and he tinkers his offense and builds his offense and morphs his offense around what his guys are capable of doing best. And it's one thing that makes him such a great coach. And he did it with Kyle Trask. Now, the beauty for them is you got a kid in Emory Jones that's sitting there waiting that may be a dynamic SEC quarterback one day. And then you got a guy like Kadarius Toney that's going to be able to take direct snaps. So I think Florida's quarterback situation is in very good hands. You've got a guy that's taken snaps, that's played, that we know can be successful, that's different, who's going to be a situational guy anyway. And then you got somebody who has a lot of talent around him, all five starters back on the offensive line. You still got big-time receivers back. Running backs are going to be fine. And Kyle Trask knows how to manage it. So even with some of the losses on defense, I think that side of the ball is still going to be pretty good. I think Mohamed Diabate is going to be the breakout player on defense in the SEC. And you know they're going to attack. And I just think Kyle Trask takes another step, progresses a little bit more. The offensive line gets a little bit better. And now you've got a really dangerous offense on your hands.
Is Kyle Pitts the best tight end in the SEC, in your opinion?
Yes. I don't think there's really any doubt about it. I think a couple of the kids at A&M might be able to give him a run, but they're probably all three going to play. And Weidemeyer and Cup are going to be the two that probably have a chance to be that good. You put those two with Beal, and now the best group of tight ends maybe in college football is in College Station. But those are the guys that can probably run like him, that are as athletic as him. But, I mean, Pitts is the guy. If you're looking for a tight end in this league, I don't think you go any further than him.
Yeah.
Now, Bo Nix at Auburn, true freshman starter last year, had a good year. Do you see him, maybe not next year, but maybe as a junior, maybe jumping into one of those like Heisman quarterback type players?
It's possible because he has the talent and
Yeah.
he has the ability, but there are still real questions. Who's going to be his big target opposite Seth Williams this year? Who's going to be his tailback this year? Tank Williams might come in and be great, but we don't know. How's the offensive line going to look? I don't have a ton of confidence in that group right now. And it didn't feel like he had a ton of confidence in that group last year because he really began to bail on his protection and bail on his progressions late in the year. And I think the offense suffered from that a little bit. The advantage I think he'll have is through this pandemic and this quarantine, he's got a guy in his house that wore the same number and played the same position at the same school. And he has a guy inside of his household that has been an offensive coordinator in college, in high school, and was his head coach in high school. He's got access to facilities, to footballs, and somebody to be able to go throw with. So while everybody else is kind of just trying to hang on by a thread and barely stay in shape and maybe go throw the ball around a little bit, Bo Nix could actually progress coming out of all of this. And then the next question is, how's the Chad Morris effect going to look with this Auburn offense? Mm-hmm. Is there still going to be a juggling act back and forth between Morris and Malzahn? Is it really going to be Chad's offense? And then how much can Chad build around what Bo Nix is able to do? So a lot of question marks, but talent, just overall talent, he has the ability to be a big-time college football quarterback. They just have to find ways to make people successful around him to help him become that.
And do you see Auburn competing for potentially an SEC title this year?
Not this year. I don't. I think there's a lot of value in having a quarterback returning this year.
Yeah.
Leadership, returning starters are going to be more important than ever. I usually make fun of returning starters because people go all bananas about, so-and-so started last year. That doesn't mean they're great. It doesn't mean they're even a good player. It might be their only option. But I think this year it's more important because they'll have a better understanding of the physicality and the speed of the game, which is important. I think having a quarterback who knows what it's like to play, who knows what it's like to be in opposing stadiums, who go against opposing defenses is going to be really valuable this year, just based on what this offseason has looked like. So there are some advantages there. Kevin Steele's going to have the defense right. I think the edge of the Auburn defensive line is going to look better with T.D. Moultrie and Big Cat Bryant, but I think the middle of the defense is where you wonder, how's that going to look? Losing Marlon Davidson, losing Derek Brown, it's just not going to be the same. Really good group of linebackers, though. KJ Britt, Owen Popo, I think have a chance to be maybe the best group in the SEC. That's going to be a group that defense can lean on. And you still got a couple of good players. I mean, Christian Tutt's back in the secondary. He's versatile, can do some different things. And Kevin's just done such a good job. You have confidence that they're going to be right. So the schedule eases up a little bit, but you still got to play. You still got to play Georgia. You still got to play Alabama. Still got to play LSU. That game with North Carolina early in the season is going to be tricky because that offense is legit. Yeah. I don't know about Carolina's defense, and I don't have a lot of confidence that they're going to be great. But that offense can go, and they got legit playmakers at tailback, at receiver, and a heck of a quarterback. So that defense better be ready to play week 2 because they will be tested.
So do you think that North Carolina could maybe make a run for a college playoff spot, or do you think that that's far out?
No, I don't think they're ready for that just yet because, like I said, number one, I don't think the defense is there. Yeah. I don't know if the offensive line's that good yet, but they got enough skill to be able to scare anybody any week. I just don't know if they have the depth to be able to do it every week. And obviously in their division, it's going to be a little bit more difficult. So I think that what Mac is doing is incredible. It is a magnificent job, especially with you see what they're doing in recruiting right now. Mm-hmm. And I mean, in today's college football, if you've got skill, you can find ways to win games. It doesn't have to be trench warfare anymore. Now, that can get you in trouble at certain points in times, and obviously there are certain games that you wish you had that. But I think another recruiting cycle or two, and if they get a couple of guys that stay around in school, then they may be in a position to go win the ACC or win their division, which will put them in a chance, obviously, to land in the playoff.
And do you think Trevor Lawrence is the Heisman favorite this year?
I don't think there's any doubt. I see some other people who mention other guys. I don't even know if anybody else should be close. Mac Jones shouldn't be close. Trask shouldn't be close. Justin Fields maybe because he'll do it against better competition. So if he has similar numbers, he may be regarded as a little bit more valuable or a more impressive player. But outside of Lawrence and Fields, I don't know if there's a lot of guys. Like I could see Jalen Waddle sneaking in there because of what he's going to do in the return game. But is he going to get enough touches? because you still have Smith and Najee Harris and Brian Robinson. So I don't know if he's even going to be a guy that can give you those kind of touches. Realistically, is Jamar Chase. I mean, if Jamar Chase is in the mix, then you have to think that his quarterback's in the mix. So that almost negates that. So it's going to be interesting to watch. I mean, there's almost no reason that Trevor Lawrence should not win the Heisman this year, other than Justin Fields. And I still think that Lawrence has the offensive line, the front end, and maybe the one thing with Lawrence will be Travis Etienne. If he has a huge year again, maybe that splits some of the votes and takes a little bit away from him. But he's in a great spot to be able to go win it.
So let's talk about the NFL draft. Who's an SEC player that was drafted in the NFL draft that isn't getting enough attention, and you think is going to have a huge career?
Lynn Bowden out of Kentucky going to Oakland. I think Lynn Bowden can line up at tailback. He can line up at slot receiver. He can catch screens. He can beat you over the top. He can be your short yardage red zone quarterback. He could be your emergency quarterback. He can return punts, return kicks. So you're talking about a guy that all of a sudden is taking up 4 or 5 roster spots that gives you a ton of value. He's explosive. His lower body is extremely powerful. I don't think durability is going to be an issue for him. And I think he can be a real problem for defenses to identify, and he makes Oakland more difficult to defend. So you look at adding Ruggs, who's going to be able to take the top off and keep your safeties deep, and now Bowden, who can move around, is going to be tough to identify. I think that Raiders offense got a lot better. I think he's someone who might not have monster numbers, but because of the different places he lines up and the different things that he does, all of a sudden he becomes really valuable.
Do you agree with the Ruggs pick, or do you think that Judy should have been the pick?
No, I like the Ruggs pick there, especially if you knew what you were going to do late. And one reason the Ruggs pick is right is because you go Brian Edwards and Lynn Bowden later in the draft, so you address the rest of your receiving core. Brian Edwards has first-round talent. He was banged up 2 years ago, and then obviously had a finger issue is what led to some of the drops, and then obviously banged up late this year. But he's a big physical guy that played like his hair was on fire the first half of last season. I mean, put the Alabama film on, and you'll be impressed with what he does. The 3 of those guys make it the right pick, because if you're going to take one, you want the guy who's different. You want the guy who does something that the rest can't do. Ruggs does that. He runs different than the rest of those guys do. So he can line up in different places and force defenses to play you differently. As good as Jerry Jeudy is, teams are still going to try to play him in man-to-man and still just going to try to play him like a regular receiver. Now, he might make you look bad, but I don't think teams will even go in thinking they can play Henry Ruggs that way because of the way that he runs. So I agreed with the pick. Take the guy who's different early if you know you're going to address the rest of your receiver room late, which is what Oakland did or Las Vegas did.
Yeah, I agree. Look, speed at receiver is the most important thing right now.
The Chiefs, they selected Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Do you think that was a good pick for them, and do you like the running back of LSU?
I think it's a great pick. Clyde Edwards-Helaire was, in my opinion, the best overall back in college football last year.
Yeah.
The guy he'll be an every down back. He was great in pass protection. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. You can line him up in the slot. He can motion around. He can work in between the tackles, outside the tackles. He's great in open field. So I think Kansas City had the 3rd or 4th most zone read plays and RPO plays of any NFL team last year. So you think about that at its core, what are you doing? You're reading and you're faking a run. Well, you have to have the option to at least give it. And if teams have to defend all of those other weapons that they have, and, especially with a tight end that can stretch the field and Travis Kelce, a guy like Tyreek who can take you over the top, all of a sudden Mecole Hardman, who's a speed guy that's difficult to defend, now things are opened up in the box. And I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire, because he's not going to have to come off the field, can get a lot of touches that way. And if they do defend that, you can motion him out or hit him out of the backfield for checkdowns. Patrick Mahomes is going to have that option as well. So I thought it was a great pick. I think he's versatile enough to give them what they need at that position, which is to be able to do a lot of different things well. And I think he'll benefit from what else that team has and be able to help them go win football games right now. They were, I think, the only team in the NFL that didn't have a running back that played 300 snaps last year on the roster. So now they got a guy that's going to be able to be an every down back that's going to be able to help them in a lot of different situations.
Did you like the DeAndre Swift pick out of Georgia?
I didn't love it, but not because of Swift.
Yeah.
You got Kerryon Johnson there, and I understand that a lot of backfields are going with the 1-2 punch now, but I would have rather. I mean, T.J. Hawkinson was great last year. I'd have rather added somebody on the outside with such a deep receiver class, and I know they went there in the first round, but maybe even go 2 receivers. Swift, somebody who can catch the ball well out of the backfield. He's a little more explosive than Kerryon, but I don't think they're too tremendously different. So I felt like there were more areas of need for Detroit than to go running back there. But I do think DeAndre Swift's going to be a good pro. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
Yeah, for sure. Him and Kerryon are just similar in style, and I feel like that it's not going to let Kerryon grow as much because he got hurt last year and he just didn't have the chance to develop as much as he could have.
Sure. No, I agree with that 100%.
So before we let you
And,
go, one final question. Is there going to be college football this fall?
Yes, absolutely. No, 100%. It's going to be different, and I think that's what we should prepare for. I can't tell you how it's going to be different because we don't know yet, but just know it's going to be different. And for all the people that are, getting their feelings hurt because there may be football without students on campus, or the football players are going to be tested or not tested enough or tested too much or putting themselves at risk, you got to find a way to get it in. And if that means conference games, less games, regional games, finishing the season early, starting the season late, whatever it is, you got to get it in. It's too important to too many people on too many different levels. And it's okay if something is different one season, 1 year, just to make sure you get it. And just because college football does something that's different this year doesn't mean that's the standard they're trying to set for the next 50 years. And so many people are getting so bent out of shape about 1 or 2 things that might look different or be different or sound different or feel different just because that's the way it needs to be this year doesn't make it wrong or doesn't make it what it will be for the next 100 years of college football. It's just what needs to happen now. And if you can find a way to get it in and it's a little bit different, that's okay, in my opinion.
Look, everything's different right now. People just got to adapt and adjust.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for being with us today, Cole.
Thank you.
Check
Anytime.
out Cole on Twitter at Cole Cubelic and check him out on the SEC Network. Thank you so much again. Thank you enough.
Anytime, guys.